Have you ever woken up one day and realized that the things you once chased with all your heart now feel hollow, empty, and unworthy of your time? Have you felt the silence of your soul louder than the noise of the world? If so, you are not lost. You are not broken. You are awakening. There comes a point in every human life when the mask of the world begins to slip. You have played your part, spoken your lines, smiled at the right moments, clapped for victories that were not yours, and chased prizes you were told were important. For years, you may have thought the chase itself was living, the applause itself was nourishment. But when awakening brushes against the edges of your soul, when your inner eyes begin to see more clearly than your outer ones, something shifts. The game reveals itself as a game. The illusions shimmer and then fall, one by one, like pieces of broken glass reflecting a light that no longer deceives you. What you once called success suddenly feels shallow. The money, the promotions, the compliments, they land in your hands like dry leaves instead of fruit. You hold them and they crumble. You taste them and they turn to dust. Where once you believed that the recognition of others would validate your existence, now you see the fragility of such belief. For how can the truth of your being depend on the ever-changing moods and opinions of others? This disillusionment is not bitterness. It is not cynicism. It is clarity. It is the heart waking up from a long sleep, the mind realizing it has been tricked by smoke and mirrors. And oh, how seductive those mirrors were. They told you that your worth was tied to your possessions, that your beauty was measured in comparisons, that your joy was to be found in the admiration of others. And you believed it, as most do, but when awakening arrives, you no longer find comfort in those lies. The glitter has lost its magic. The applause has lost its sound. At first, this can feel devastating. You look around and wonder if you are the only one who sees through the performance. Others still play their roles with such conviction, laughing, competing, comparing, flaunting, and you wonder if perhaps you are the strange one, the broken one. You wonder why the things that used to matter now seem trivial, and why the fire that once drove you has turned to smoke. But here is the truth: you are not broken. You are breaking free. When the illusions begin to dissolve, life becomes both lighter and heavier. Lighter because you are no longer chained to expectations that never belonged to you. Heavier because the weight of reality can press against the chest, forcing you to breathe differently, to live differently. You cannot go back to the person who found joy in the shallow, who was willing to sell hours of their life in exchange for applause or approval. That old self has served its purpose and now dissolves like mist in the morning sun. The disillusionment is a gift disguised as loss. It takes away the toys of the ego so the soul can find real treasure. And yet, in the beginning, it feels like everything is slipping from your grasp. The career ladder you once climbed now looks like scaffolding around an empty building. The friendships built only on gossip or convenience no longer feed you. The admiration of strangers, once intoxicating, feels hollow, even embarrassing. You stand in the middle of a life you worked so hard to build and whisper to yourself, "Is this all there is?" That question is not despair. It is the seed of awakening. It is the moment you stop letting the world dictate your worth and begin searching for what cannot be taken away. For years, you may have pursued security, but now you crave truth. For years, you may have been dazzled by appearance, but now you hunger for essence. This hunger is not satisfied with shallow pleasures, with temporary highs. It reaches deeper, demanding that you stop pretending, stop performing, and start living with eyes wide open. There will be resistance. The mind, conditioned by years of chasing illusions, will try to drag you back. It will whisper, you should care about this, you should want this, you should fight for this. But the awakened heart does not move by shoulds. It moves by knowing, and deep within, you know when something is empty, even if the world calls it full. You know when something is false, even if the world swears it is true. You know when you are alive and when you are only acting alive. This knowing is what makes ordinary pursuits lose their flavor. Where others find excitement in competition, you feel only weariness. Where others chase recognition, you seek peace. Where others build towers of ego, you search for the ground of humility. And though it may feel like you have lost motivation, what you have truly lost is illusion. And once you lose illusion, you cannot pretend it nourishes you anymore. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot unknow what your spirit has whispered. And so you find yourself in the uncomfortable, sacred space of disillusionment. This is the season when nothing external seems to matter because you are learning to find what matters within. This is the time when applause feels hollow because you are learning to hear the quiet applause of your soul. This is the time when wealth seems like poverty because you are learning the immeasurable wealth of truth. The disillusionment is not the end of your journey. It is the necessary unraveling that makes space for what is real. But in this moment, it feels like emptiness. And perhaps it is emptiness, but emptiness with purpose. A hollow vessel must be cleared before it can be filled with living water. A field must be stripped bare before new seeds can be planted. So too, the illusions must crumble before your spirit can stand firmly on what is eternal. So when you look at the life around you and find no joy in the things you once adored, do not mistake it for failure. It is freedom. It is the first breath after drowning, the first glimpse of dawn after a long night. It is your soul whispering, enough of the shadows. It is time to seek the light. When awakening touches the soul, the world does not only lose its shine, it also quiets itself. The noise that once seemed so necessary, so constant, so urgent begins to fade. The conversations that once filled your days, the music, the arguments, the laughter, the endless chatter of a restless mind, all of it softens like an orchestra lowering its instruments after a long, frantic song. What remains is silence, and that silence, at first, can be terrifying. For silence has a way of holding up a mirror, a way of forcing you to face yourself without distraction, without escape. In a world that worships noise, silence feels like rebellion. It feels like stepping out of line, like refusing to march to the beat of the same drum that keeps everyone else busy and distracted. Yet when your soul awakens, you no longer crave the drum beat. You long for the spaces between the beats, the quiet intervals where truth is whispered, where eternity can be heard. The silence does not shout, it does not demand, it simply waits, patient and eternal. And when you lean into it, you begin to discover it is not empty at all. The silence is alive, it breathes, it speaks. Within its stillness, you hear a rhythm more ancient than any song the world can compose. It is the rhythm of your own spirit, steady, unshaken, enduring. For so long, you may have drowned that inner rhythm with the clamor of ambition and distraction. You filled your days with activity, with endless doing, with constant reaching. You believed the noise proved you were alive, that the busyness was a sign of importance, that silence was dangerous because silence meant stopping, and stopping meant facing what you did not want to face. But when awakening comes, the fear of silence transforms. You begin to crave it the way a thirsty traveler craves water. You begin to see that silence is not a void, but a home. In the quiet, you hear your own breath as if for the first time. You notice the rise and fall of your chest, the pulse that carries life through your veins, the subtle hum of existence itself. And suddenly, the things you used to overlook reveal themselves as miracles. A single bird's call at dawn becomes a symphony. The rustle of leaves in the wind becomes a sermon. The pause between your thoughts becomes a gateway to something greater than thought. The silence between the notes is where the real music lives. Every musician knows this truth. Without the spaces, the notes would be nothing but noise. Without the rests, the melody would collapse into chaos. It is the quiet that gives shape to sound, the pause that makes the song whole. And so it is with life. Your days are not defined only by what you do, but also by the spaces in between. Your meaning is not only in your words, but in the breath you take before you speak. Your awakening is not in the endless striving, but in the stillness that reveals what striving cannot touch. At first, this silence feels unnatural. You may sit in a room with no distractions, and the mind will scream for something to fill the void. It will demand a screen, a voice, a task, a reason, anything but this emptiness. But if you resist the urge to escape, if you let the silence surround you, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear the whispers that the noise has always drowned out. You begin to notice the truths that can only be spoken in stillness. You realize that silence has been courting you all along, waiting for you to slow down, waiting for you to listen. And in that listening, you begin to meet yourself, not the self you show to the world, not the self shaped by others' opinions, but the self beneath all of that, the eternal self, the soul that does not need applause, that does not crave achievement, that is not shaken by the rise and fall of circumstances. You meet the self that is content simply to be, and in that being you discover peace. The silence is not about withdrawing from life. It is about learning to hear life more clearly. It is about realizing that beneath the chaos of the world, beneath the endless demands and distractions, there is a deeper current, a river that flows steady and unbroken. When you fall into silence, you fall into that river. You allow yourself to be carried by something larger than ambition, larger than fear. You allow yourself to trust the rhythm that has been pulsing since before you were born. And the more time you spend in that silence, the more you see how precious it is. You begin to notice how rare it is in a world addicted to sound. You begin to guard it, to carve out space for it, to welcome it like an old friend. You may find yourself waking before dawn just to sit in the quiet, not because you are avoiding life, but because you are embracing it more deeply than ever before. The silence becomes your teacher. It shows you where you are restless, where you are afraid, where you are clinging to illusions. It reveals the truth of your desires, the purity of your intentions. It strips away the unnecessary until only what matters remains. And though the world may not understand why you seek this quiet, though it may label you withdrawn, detached, or strange, you know the truth. You know that in the silence, you are more alive than you ever were in the noise. There will be moments when you miss the old distractions, when the silence feels too heavy, too vast. You may long for the comfort of the familiar noise. But each time you return to silence, it welcomes you without judgment. Each time you sit in stillness, the silence whispers again, "You are enough, you are whole, you are eternal." And in those moments, the silence is no longer an absence, it is presence itself. The silence between the notes teaches you that life is not about constant doing, but about sacred being. It reminds you that every pause is holy, every breath is a prayer, every moment of stillness holds the infinite. And as you learn to trust that silence, you find that it begins to follow you, even into the noise. You carry it with you like a hidden flame, a quiet strength that cannot be disturbed. There comes a time when the dreams you once held so tightly begin to feel like burdens, when the pursuits that once filled your days with urgency and excitement suddenly taste stale upon your tongue. You remember the early fire, the way ambition stirred you awake in the morning, the way goals glowed like distant stars you were determined to reach. You chased them, ran toward them, stretched yourself thin for them, believing that on the other side of the struggle would be satisfaction, belonging, and joy. And for a season, it may have seemed true. The chase itself carried a thrill. The victories, small or large, lifted you. The rewards shined brightly enough to keep you running. But something shifts when the soul begins to awaken. The ladder you have been climbing for so long reveals itself to be leaning against the wrong wall. You look down at the medals, the promotions, the accolades, and though they once filled you with pride, now they look strangely hollow. You wonder how you ever thought they could define you. You wonder how you once poured your blood, your tears, your energy into building a house that, once built, offers no shelter to your spirit. The weariness sets in, not because you have grown weaker, but because you have grown wiser. The fire that once burned for applause flickers and dies, not because you are incapable of striving, but because the striving no longer holds meaning. You recognize the repetition of it all, the endless cycle of wanting, reaching, achieving, and then discovering that the satisfaction does not last. Like a wheel turning without rest, you ran and ran, only to find yourself in the same place, empty, unfulfilled, yearning for more. And the soul, once awakened, refuses to play that game again. It grows tired of rehearsing the same play with the same ending, no matter how many times the scenery is changed. It refuses to feed on crumbs when it knows there is bread. It refuses to drink from empty wells when it has tasted living water. This weariness is not laziness. Do not mistake it for apathy. It is not that you no longer care about life. It is that you care too much to waste it on pursuits that do not nourish you. It is not that you lack ambition. It is that your ambition has grown too vast to be satisfied by titles or possessions. The weariness comes because your spirit knows there must be more. And until you find that more, every old pursuit feels like a performance you no longer wish to attend. You see people around you still striving, still competing, still measuring themselves against each other, and you feel a quiet sorrow. You know their struggle because once it was yours. You know the hunger in their eyes, the constant reaching, the restless need to prove something, and you also know the emptiness waiting for them at the finish line. You want to tell them, I have been where you are, and I promise you, what you are chasing will not fill you. But words are fragile in a world addicted to noise, and sometimes all you can do is step aside, carrying your weariness like a lantern, showing another way by simply refusing to run the old race. There will be days when the old pursuits still whisper your name. The ego remembers the thrill of recognition. The mind remembers the safety of routine. They call to you like former lovers, promising comfort, promising importance, promising joy. But you cannot return to them. You have outgrown them. What once felt like a crown now feels like a chain. What once seemed like a reward now reveals itself as a distraction. And so you sit with your weariness, not as a curse, but as a teacher. For this weariness is holy. It is the soul saying, stop pouring water into broken cups. Stop running after shadows. Stop giving your strength to things that will never love you back. It is a doorway disguised as fatigue, a redirection disguised as disinterest. It tells you that the fire must be rekindled, but not in the old ways. It tells you that there is a deeper work waiting for you, a truer calling, one that will not leave you exhausted and empty, but alive and rooted. The old pursuits were necessary for a time. They taught you discipline, resilience, focus. They shaped you into someone capable of more, but they are not the destination. They were stepping stones, not home. And the weariness you feel is the signal that you have stayed too long in a place that no longer serves your growth. The spirit is restless because it knows you are meant for higher ground. You begin to see that life is not about chasing endless goals, but about aligning yourself with something greater. You begin to understand that success measured by the world's standards is not success at all, not if it costs you your peace, your joy, your soul. And once that understanding takes root, there is no going back. The old pursuits cannot deceive you anymore. They have lost their shine. The weariness, then, is a sacred pause. It is a chance to rest your tired hands, to unclench your fists, to stop proving and start listening. It is a chance to ask yourself questions that once terrified you. Who am I without my achievements? What matters when the titles fade, when the applause grows quiet? What remains when all the things I chased are stripped away? And in the asking of those questions, you begin to glimpse the truth. You begin to see that what you were searching for was never outside of you. It was never in the trophies, never in the promotions, never in the applause. It was always in the quiet, steady presence of your own soul. The weariness clears the stage so that you can finally hear its voice. So when the old pursuits no longer thrill you, when the fire you once had for them dies away, do not mourn as if you have lost yourself. Rejoice that you are being freed. Give thanks for the weariness because it means you are ready to stop running in circles. It means you are ready to walk a straighter, truer path. When the old pursuits fall away and the illusions lose their shine, what rises in their place is not emptiness, but a deep, unshakable hunger. It is not the hunger of the body, not the craving for food or comfort, but the hunger of the soul. It is the ache for something real, something unbreakable, something that does not wither with time or vanish when the applause ends. This hunger is both a gift and a burden. A gift because it points you toward truth. A burden because nothing shallow can satisfy it anymore. You try at first to return to the old remedies. You try to pour yourself again into ambition, into routine, into possessions and recognition. You try to tell yourself that if you just work harder, if you just achieve more, if you just gather enough, you will feel whole again. But the hunger persists. It gnaws at you quietly, whispering that what you are feeding yourself is not nourishment but distraction. No matter how much you consume, the emptiness remains. For the soul does not feast on what is temporary. It does not fill itself with what is false. The hunger pulls you inward. It forces you to examine what you once avoided, to ask questions you never dared to ask. What is real in a world of imitation? What endures in a world where everything fades? What will remain when the titles vanish, when the beauty fades, when the possessions turn to dust? This hunger demands that you strip away the layers of performance, the roles you have played, the masks you have worn, until you stand bare before yourself. And though it feels frightening, it is also liberating. For the hunger is not punishing you, it is guiding you. There is a truth hidden deep inside this hunger. You were not made to survive only on the surface. You were not meant to settle for shallow conversations, transactional relationships, hollow victories. Your soul was built for depth. It was built to love without condition, to seek meaning beyond profit, to create from a place of purity, to live in alignment with something greater than ego. That is why the shallow cannot satisfy you anymore, because you are awakening to your true design. The hunger for something real will make you restless in the presence of pretense. You will sit in rooms where people boast and compete, and instead of feeling impressed, you will feel an emptiness in the air. You will listen to conversations filled with gossip or triviality, and your spirit will ache for depth. You will scroll through endless images of perfection and success, and you will feel nothing but longing for authenticity. This longing may isolate you. It may make you feel like you do not belong in the world you once fit so easily into. But that sense of not belonging is the compass pointing you toward where you are truly meant to be. The hunger sharpens your vision. You begin to see the difference between what glitters and what is gold. You begin to sense when love is conditional and when it is true. You notice when words are spoken from ego and when they are spoken from spirit. You discern when actions are driven by fear and when they are born of freedom. The hunger will not allow you to settle for what is false, because once you have tasted the possibility of the real, nothing else will do. And yet this hunger is not easily satisfied. It is not quenched by small comforts or half-truths. It drives you deeper and deeper into yourself, into silence, into prayer, into art, into nature, into whatever awakens that spark of authenticity. You may find yourself standing at the edge of the ocean, listening to the waves, and realizing you feel more nourished there than in all the crowded banquets of your past life. You may find yourself moved to tears by a simple act of kindness, realizing that love has always been the real sustenance you craved. You may find yourself creating, not for recognition, not for profit, but because something within you must express itself, and in that expression, you finally taste truth. The hunger for something real is relentless. It does not quiet down just because it makes life inconvenient. It does not disappear simply because others around you are satisfied with less. It will not let you return to sleep once you have been awakened. And though at times it feels like torment, it is also the compass of your soul. It is the sign that you are alive in the deepest sense, that you refuse to numb yourself with illusions, that you are willing to walk the harder path for the sake of finding what is true. You may lose people along the way. Not everyone can understand this hunger. Some will tell you to be content with what you have, to stop searching, to stop questioning, to accept the shallow feast the world offers. But you cannot, and you must not. For to silence this hunger is to silence your spirit. To ignore it is to betray yourself. So you keep searching, and though the path is uncertain, though it leads you into solitude at times, though it strips away comforts and illusions, you continue because you know the hunger is holy. It is not punishment, it is invitation, an invitation to a deeper love, a truer purpose, a life aligned not with the fleeting but with the eternal. The hunger for something real is the soul's way of telling you that you were never meant to settle for survival. You were never meant to build your identity on shifting sand. You were meant to live rooted in truth, to breathe in the fullness of being, to taste the richness of authenticity. And once you have known that taste, even for a moment, you will spend your life seeking it again. When the soul awakens, one of the first companions to arrive is loneliness. Not the loneliness of being unloved or unwanted, but the loneliness of standing on ground others cannot yet see. You begin to feel the distance, even in the midst of company. You can sit at a crowded table, laughter circling like music, and yet something inside you is quiet, watching, aware. The conversations that once drew you in now pass over you like smoke. The games you used to play no longer interest you. You are present, yet apart, visible, yet unseen. And that separation, that gap between who you were and who you are becoming, births a solitude that can ache deep in the bones. At first, you may try to ignore it. You may try to pull yourself back into the circles you once belonged to. You may attempt to laugh in the same rhythm, speak in the same tone, nod at the same stories, but the laughter feels forced. The words feel heavy. The stories feel empty. The loneliness deepens because you realize you can no longer return to the version of yourself that fits so neatly into the crowd. Awakening has changed your shape, and the old patterns no longer fit. This loneliness is not punishment. It is a sign of growth. It is what happens when the soul sheds its skin. You cannot stay where you were, and yet you have not fully arrived where you are going. You stand in between, and in that in-between space, companionship is rare. Most people cannot walk with you into the silence. Most people are not ready to question what you now question. And so you walk alone, not because you are unworthy of company, but because your path has narrowed and deepened, and not everyone can follow. The loneliness of awakening can feel unbearable at times. You may look at the people you love and feel a gulf you cannot cross. You may try to share your insights, your new way of seeing, only to be met with blank stares or polite nods. Some may dismiss you, some may resist you, some may even fear you because your awakening threatens the comfort of their sleep. And so you learn to guard your truths, to speak less, to carry your revelations quietly, as if they were fragile flames not ready for the wind. Yet within this loneliness lies a strange kind of beauty. For when you are stripped of constant company, you are left face to face with yourself. You begin to discover the strength of your own presence. You begin to learn how to sit with your thoughts, your fears, your dreams without distraction. The silence that once frightened you becomes a companion. The solitude that once felt like a wound becomes a sanctuary. In that sanctuary, you meet parts of yourself you never knew. You discover resilience you had forgotten. You uncover creativity buried under years of noise. You feel emotions you once numbed. And slowly, the loneliness transforms into solitude, and solitude into a kind of friendship with your own soul. It is there, in that sacred aloneness, that you begin to realize you are never truly alone. The loneliness of awakening also teaches you compassion, because when you see how easy it is for others to remain asleep, you no longer judge them. You remember that you too once believed in the illusions, once clung to the noise, once ran with the crowd. You understand their fear of silence, their need for distraction, their hunger for validation. You no longer look down on them, you love them more deeply, even if you cannot always walk beside them. This loneliness opens your heart because you realize the distance between you and others is not a wall, but a space where grace can live. Still, there will be nights when the solitude feels heavy, when you long for someone to truly see you, to understand the new language your soul now speaks. You may cry, not out of despair, but out of the aching desire to be known. This is part of the journey. The tears water the soil of your spirit, softening it for the seeds of deeper connection yet to come. For though awakening often begins in loneliness, it does not end there. In time, your loneliness will draw you to people who resonate with your truth. You will find others who have walked through the same silence, who have felt the same hunger, who have borne the same solitude. The meeting of such souls is rare, but when it happens, it is like two rivers joining, natural, powerful, undeniable. Until that moment comes, the loneliness serves its purpose. It prepares you to recognize authenticity when you encounter it, to value depth over surface, to welcome true companionship when it arrives. There is no need to fear this season of solitude. It is the refining fire. It burns away the false friendships, the shallow bonds, the performative connections. It clears space for relationships built on truth, honesty, and love without condition. And though you may feel abandoned, in truth, you are being prepared. You are being shaped into someone who no longer depends on the crowd for validation, who no longer needs noise to feel alive. The loneliness of awakening is not the absence of love, it is the making of love. It is the soul learning to love itself, to sit in its own presence, to rest in its own company. And once you can love yourself in solitude, you are ready to love others without fear, without need, without disguise. So though the nights may feel long and the silence may echo, do not mistake this loneliness for emptiness. It is fullness in disguise. It is the sacred work of transformation, carving you into someone who can hold truth without trembling, someone who can walk alone without losing heart, someone who can love without chains. There comes a time when your hands grow weary from holding on. You grip so tightly to people, to memories, to identities, to possessions, to expectations that your knuckles ache. You believe that if you just hold on a little longer, things will return to the way they were, that the comfort will return, that the certainty will come back. But the soul, once awakened, whispers differently. It tells you the truth you do not want to hear, that to rise you must release, that to walk forward you must unclench your fists, that to step into the fullness of your being you must let go. Letting go is not weakness, it is courage of the highest order. It is standing at the edge of the familiar and daring to step into the unknown. It is loosening your grasp on the life you have constructed brick by brick, even when you are unsure what will replace it. It is trusting that the ground will appear beneath your feet, even as you take the leap. And there is nothing easy about it. The ego fights for control, the mind clings to safety, the heart resists the pain of release, yet the spirit insists over and over that liberation requires surrender. We are taught to hold on. From childhood, we are told to cling to our dreams, to protect our possessions, to maintain our relationships, to defend our identities. We equate letting go with failure. We think release means giving up, but in truth, the opposite is so. Holding on when something no longer serves you is what drains you. Clinging to what is already gone is what keeps you trapped. Real strength is found in the open hand, not the clenched fist. When the awakening arrives, the old weight becomes unbearable. You find yourself exhausted by the identities you have been performing, by the roles you have been playing. You grow tired of carrying people who do not wish to walk beside you. You feel the heaviness of possessions that promise joy, but delivered only burden. The courage to let go comes when you finally admit that these things, however precious they once seemed, no longer belong to you. They have taught you what they were meant to teach. They have served their purpose, and now they must be released. Letting go can look like walking away from a relationship that has long ceased to honor your soul. It can look like leaving a career that no longer feeds your spirit. It can look like stepping out of identities you have outgrown, shedding labels others still try to place upon you. It can even look like releasing versions of yourself that you loved, versions that once made sense, but no longer fit who you are becoming. And in that release, there is grief. You mourn not only what you are letting go of, but the years you spent clinging to it. You cry for the dreams that never came true, the friendships that slipped through your fingers, the illusions you once believed in so fervently. The grief is real, but it is also cleansing. It washes the heart, it clears the path, it prepares the soil for what must come next. The courage to let go also means surrendering control over outcomes. It means releasing the need to know how everything will unfold. It is the bravery of trusting that life, in its infinite wisdom, knows better than your limited plans. It is saying, I release what I cannot carry, and I trust that what is mine will remain. It is resting in the truth that what is meant for you cannot pass you by, and what passes you by was never meant for you. This surrender can feel like falling, but in time you realize you are being carried. You are not plummeting into emptiness. You are being lifted into freedom. The air that rushes around you as you release is not the wind of loss, but the breath of liberation. For when your hands are empty, they are finally free to receive. When your heart is unburdened, it is finally free to expand. Many resist this letting go because they fear emptiness. They imagine that if they release what they know, they will be left with nothing. But life abhors a vacuum. When you let go of what is false, you make room for what is true. When you release what is heavy, you create space for what is light. When you surrender what has died, you open yourself to what is alive. The emptiness is not a void, it is an invitation. And so the courage to let go is also the courage to trust yourself, to trust that you are strong enough to withstand loss, to trust that you are wise enough to walk into the unknown, to trust that your spirit, which has carried you this far, will not abandon you now. Each time you release, you strengthen this trust. Each time you surrender, you prove to yourself that you can survive the falling away and still rise, even taller, even freer, even more yourself than before. Letting go does not mean rejecting or denying the past. It means honoring it, bowing to it, thanking it for its lessons, and then releasing it with love. It means holding your memories with tenderness, but refusing to let them chain your present or dictate your future. It means carrying forward the wisdom while leaving behind the weight. The courage to let go is not a single act, but a continual practice. Again and again, life will ask you to release, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully, and each time you are invited to choose trust over fear, freedom over bondage, growth over stagnation. The more you practice, the more you realize that letting go is not about losing. It is about aligning. It is about opening yourself to the life that has been waiting for you all along. So when you find yourself standing at the edge, trembling with the fear of release, remember this: you are not stepping into emptiness. You are stepping into truth. You are not giving up. You are rising up. And the hands that unclench in courage will one day hold more than they ever dared to imagine. There comes a moment after the breaking, after the silence, after the letting go, when something new begins to stir. It does not arrive with thunder or lightning. It does not announce itself with fanfare or applause. It comes quietly, like dawn slipping over the horizon, like the first breath after weeping. It is the birth of a new way of being, a way of living that does not depend on illusions, a way of seeing that does not bow to fear. It rises softly, yet its presence transforms everything. At first, you may not even notice it. You are still grieving what you left behind, still adjusting to the emptiness created by your release. The world may look the same on the surface, but within you, the ground has shifted. Where once there was restlessness, now there is stillness. Where once there was hunger without end, now there is a quiet fullness. This is the seed of the new way of being, planted deep within the soil of surrender. It is not about becoming someone else. It is not about striving to achieve a higher version of yourself. It is about remembering who you truly are, beneath the noise, beneath the masks, beneath the endless striving. It is about returning to the essence that was always there, waiting for you to come home. You realize that you do not need to chase meaning. It is already within you. You do not need to manufacture peace. It is the natural state of your soul once the clutter is cleared away. This new way of being changes how you move through the world. You no longer rush into the future with desperation, nor do you cling to the past with fear. You begin to live in the present, not as an idea, but as an embodied truth. You find beauty in the smallest things, the warmth of sunlight on your face, the laughter of a child, the rhythm of your own breath. These moments, once overlooked, now shimmer with significance because you are finally awake enough to notice them. The birth of this new way is not about retreating from life, but engaging with it more deeply. You do not need to renounce the world to live awakened. You simply learn to meet it differently. You carry stillness into the noise, compassion into the conflict, truth into the illusion. You no longer measure your worth by what you achieve or acquire, but by the love you embody and the authenticity you bring. You are no longer enslaved by the question, "What will they think of me?" Instead, you are guided by the question, "Am I being true to myself?" And in that shift, relationships change. You no longer cling to people out of fear of loneliness. You no longer tolerate connections that drain your spirit. Instead, you invite only what is real, what is nourishing, what is aligned. Some people may fall away, but those who remain or those who arrive will meet you at the level of your soul, not your performance. There is a sweetness to these connections, a purity to the love that flows without conditions. This new way of being also transforms how you see challenges. Once you may have cursed hardship, resisted pain, feared uncertainty. But now you begin to see them as teachers. You see loss as a clearing, not a punishment. You see endings as sacred doorways to beginnings. You realize that every storm has carved you into the person who now stands, awake and unshaken. The trials no longer define you, they refine you. The birth of this new way is not dramatic, but it is undeniable. You notice it when you no longer feel the compulsion to prove yourself. You notice it when silence no longer feels threatening, but comforting. You notice it when joy no longer depends on circumstances, but wells up from within. You notice it when you stop searching for life to be extraordinary, and instead find the extraordinary in the ordinary. This way of being is not about perfection. You will still stumble, still feel fear, still face days of heaviness. But the difference is that you no longer mistake those moments for your identity. You see them as passing clouds across the vast sky of your being. You rest in the awareness that behind every storm, the sky remains unchanged, vast, open, eternal. That is the ground you now stand upon, the ground of presence, the ground of truth. The birth of this new way also brings with it a deep responsibility. For once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you awaken, you cannot return to sleep. You begin to live not only for yourself, but as a light for others still wandering in the dark. You no longer need to convince them or force them or preach to them. Your presence itself becomes a message. The way you move, the way you speak, the way you love becomes a quiet invitation for others to remember their own truth. And perhaps the most profound change is this. You no longer feel that gnawing emptiness that once drove you into the arms of illusions. The hunger for something real has been met, not by something outside you, but by the wellspring within. You realize that what you were seeking was never out there. It was always here, in your breath, in your stillness, in your being. The journey was never about becoming, it was about remembering. So the birth of a new way of being is not a destination, but a return to simplicity, a return to love, a return to the truth that you are enough here now without adornment, without pretense, without striving. And in that return, you find the freedom that cannot be taken, the peace that cannot be shaken, the joy that does not fade. So if nothing feels worth doing after your awakening, remember this: you are not meant to do everything anymore. You are meant to do the one thing your soul was born for. And when you discover that purpose, the fire will return, not the frantic fire of ambition, but the steady flame of truth. The world does not need your exhaustion, it needs your awakening.